I want to talk about some chaste people. The first time I heard anything positive about chastity was in 1976. I was sitting in a theater in Manassas, Virginia with my best friend Gary Carrico, and we were watching Rocky 1. And Sylvester Stallone comes on, and he's the underdog, and he's going to go fight the champion, and he hasn't got a chance. And he has this, but that's not what was interesting. What was interesting was there was this character that Burgess Meredith played, this crusty old trainer, and he came up and said, "Don't have sex, it'll make your legs weak." And I thought, really? I had never, at 22 years old, ever heard anything about sex except have as much of it as often as you can, with whoever you can, as joyously, and just more is better. I never heard anybody say, maybe less is better, until that movie. That's the first time. But I kind of blocked it off and thought, that was weird. Just kind of left it in the back of my head. Many years later, my second wife, who worked for Coca-Cola in the corporate office in Atlanta, Georgia, they hired Muhammad Ali as their spokesperson, so I got a chance to meet him. It was a tremendous honor because he was a hero of mine all my life. And for 6 weeks before he would go into a title fight, he would be celibate. He would not have sex with anyone, himself or anyone. And I thought, wow, this is the most recognized man in all the world. He's more recognized than the United States president, more than the Pope, more than any rock star. This is the most recognized man on the entire world. And I'm not the most recognized man in the entire world, so he must have something going for him that I don't. And so that kind of struck me. The next time I was to run across a sexual idea, I had a girlfriend who worked for United, and she could go anywhere she wanted. So I told her, if you fly us first class all over the world, I'll put us in 5-star restaurants, Four Seasons, wherever we go. So we got on a plane one day and we went to New York. And we got in New York and said, let's go to London. We got to London, and I don't really like London. Nothing against London, I just don't like it. Been there a couple times, kind of boring. So we got to London, I thought, I really want to go see the Oracle of Delphi. Because I had read about it since I was a child. Because Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle would go to the Oracle of Delphi when there was time to decide, should we go to war? Should I marry this person? Should I divorce this person? Should we borrow money for a treasury? Should we build a new temple? Major decisions. You always went to the Oracle of Delphi. What it was this cave, and there was a young virgin there. And she was setting up in this cave, and she would have visions, and she would go into a trance. And then there was various monks who would interpret what her vision said. She would kind of mumble something, and they would interpret it in poetic hexameter, and in this beautiful poetic phrasing. And then these people would come back, and with these amazingly, if you read the history, they're just amazingly brilliant ideas. But the only requirement, and this was the most powerful woman in the second most powerful civilization after the United States civilization in the history of mankind. And she is the most powerful person. But there was one requirement, and one requirement only, and that's that she'd be chaste, completely chaste. Their belief was that their god Apollo would enter her body, and that as all avatars, their god was speaking through her to her people. They all believed that. The ancient Greeks believed that. And so what she had to do was she had to be completely pure, so she wouldn't be thinking about another man, so there was time that Apollo could enter her. And I thought, that's weird. The next thing that I remember about learning about chastity was this. The most famous prayer in all the Christian world is the Lord's Prayer. But the second most famous prayer is by a man named St. Augustine from the 4th century AD. And his prayer went like this: God, give me chastity, just not today. And that is the second most famous prayer in all the Christian world. Augustine came up at a time when there was a class of women, and they weren't girlfriends and they weren't hookers. They were kind of in between. They were called concubines. And you were responsible to take care of them financially, but you weren't allowed to marry them. We don't have that in our society today, but it was kind of in the middle between hookers and girlfriends and wives and things like that. And he loved this woman like crazy, and he loved having sex with her. Augustine loved to have sex, but he couldn't stop. He couldn't stop. And so he would pray to the God of his understanding, give me chastity, but just not today. And after 11 years, his mother, St. Monica, prayed for him, and he finally gave it up. She wanted him to get married, but he went a little farther, and he went and became chaste. And when he did, he became the most influential man for 1,000 years. 1,000 years, from 400 AD until 1500 AD, when Spinoza came out. His thought because of the purity of his thought, influenced more people than anybody for 1,000 years because he was chaste. And I'm not selling Christianity. What I'm selling is power. I'm selling power. It doesn't matter whether you're Hindu or Christian, it doesn't matter. There's some silly examples too. Did you know that graham crackers were made by a man named Sylvester Graham, and they were designed to be chaste? That's what they were designed for. Back then they didn't have sugar on them. They were very bland, and they wanted you to have a bland diet so you would be chaste. Graham crackers. Kellogg's cornflakes was originally designed to promote chastity in men. That's what they didn't have sugar at the time. They were just very bland. So there had been some kind of wacky stuff around chastity, just kind of kooky stuff. The guy who's probably most famous in the 20th century is Gandhi with his chastity. Now Gandhi is a tremendously interesting man to me. He only wrote one book because he thought that writing books was an arrogant thing to do, but he was in prison a number of times. And one of the times he was in for about 6 years, and they talked him into writing a book. And what he did was, he decided that after his 4th child, he didn't want to have any more children. And he didn't believe in contraception. To his dying day, he didn't. So he didn't want to have any more children, and he wanted to spend his time serving people with his whole soul. He has a wonderful expression. He says, "I had not realized then how indispensable it was for self-realization, but I clearly saw that one desiring to serve humanity with his whole soul could not do without it." He's talking about chastity. He wanted to serve humanity with his whole soul, and he couldn't do it without chastity, and he knew it. So at 36, he gave it up. He actually tried to give it up 4 times, and he failed. And we're talking about the most spiritually gifted man since Muhammad, at least, from the 6th century. So we're talking about an incredibly gifted man, and he failed 4 times. Which warms the cockles of my heart, because I have failed so much in my life that his failure is what appeals to me. It's not his successes, because that's so up there that I can't relate, but it's his failures that I can hold on to. But when he finally succeeded, like Augustine, he freed South Africa. He freed India from the British Empire with no guns. The idea of a satyagahara, which means firmness and truth, which most English-speaking people refer to as non-violent, non-cooperation. Gandhi hated that. He liked satyagahara, firmness and truth. But it came up for him 30 days after he committed to being chaste. He had no idea it was coming, and that's what happened. And he changed the world. Finally, there's just a list of people that you need to know about that are chaste. Here are some of them. Joan of Arc, Queen Elizabeth, Florence Nightingale, Leonardo da Vinci, Lewis Carroll, Isaac Newton, John Milton, Leo Tolstoy, and let's not forget Jesus. That's it.